All right, so hello everyone. So we're about to start. So if you're here, please turn on your camera. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. 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 All right. So we're going to continue from what we've left on Monday. And so just to quickly summarize, like what we already discussed about experiments. So we said the idea of experimentation, the key feature of experimentation is that you want to see if you introduce something to a group of people, and which we call intervention or manipulation or experimentation. How would they react according to your hypothesis, right? Whatever you're hypothesizing about, how would this group of people react, right? So we think, for instance, that introducing people, so giving people money would make them more motivated to work, right? So you want to see the effects of money and enthusiasm for working, or you want to see, in terms of communication, you want to see if using like electronic devices could increase communication apprehension, for instance, right? Or like some sort of like ad appeal, like using fear appeals in public service announcement could tackle the issue of reckless driving, so something like that. So in experimentation, we say the idea is you want to see the reaction to the manipulation, stimuli, in comparison to the lack of that manipulation. And this is the key feature. There's always a comparison between if one manipulation is introduced versus when it's not introduced. And so that's why in experiments, we always talk about groups or conditions. So it could be in experimental design that you would have one group that go through different experimentation stages, or you have two groups, each one experiencing a different condition, right? And so there's always a comparison benchmark, or there's always you're either comparing a group to its past status, so past and future, pre and post, or you're comparing one group to like one other group or different other groups. So, and between those two things, if you're comparing across times or across participants, there are multiple experimental designs we can come up with. So let's start with the most basic one, which is not actually a full experiment. We call this a quasi-experimental design, or it's called one group post-test only design. And that is when you don't have a knowledge of a pre-existing state, and you don't have a comparison group, but you just introduce something new and you want to see how people would react, right? One example of that is like, imagine you're having a new instructor, first time teaching in a university, and you introduce as an instructor a new type of like an online quizzes, right? So you change something about your course structure to fit the online environment by making student watching online videos and seeing how they perform. The issue with that is you haven't taught those students before. So they don't know, you don't have like a baseline of how they used to perform before. So that's one. Number two, you don't have another group. So there is no prior knowledge of what the participant's level is, and you don't have a comparison. Hence, we call that a quasi-experimental. And this is more used for like campaigns, right? So imagine you are a new company, you're trying to sell cosmetic product, and you're just testing new things, right? So you don't have a baseline of what the consumers think about your product, because your product did not exist before, and you're also not testing at that stage. You're not testing people who've been exposed to the product to people who did not use the product, because you don't have the resources to do that yet. So you're just coming up with new interventions and looking to see how people would react. Another type of a quasi-experiment is, at least when you have a pre-test. So you have a pre-test before the intervention, before the manipulation or the experimentation, and then you test to see the effects of post versus pre. This is also called a quasi-experiment because you don't have a comparative, like something that you could compare to. So, for instance, so imagine like you're working with a group of patients. Let's see, and you want to see like it's some sort of like a rehab or like a post-cancer treatment, and you want to have something or a program to help patients keep up with their like regimen, like keeping up for like medications, keeping up with the medications, attending to the visits, meeting the requirements or targets for physical activities, things like that, right? So you could be working with them, and so you introduce a new device that does that. So there's a lot of wearable devices, or even like smartphone apps of like the track, like blood pressure, would give you like reminders when to take your pills. You could schedule visits and then save them, and also you would have alert system for that, etc., right? Because it's one group only, the results or any improvements that this group make in your goals, in terms of like the patients meeting their goal, you won't be able to tell for sure if it's due to your intervention or just due to like time passing or time progress. And what I mean by that is, because when people start out something, they're still learning. There's a learning curve. They're still trying to get used to it. And so just if enough time passes, they would improve. I'll give you another example. So like for me, you were a new group. For you, I was a new instructor, right? And so just in a given semester, right, you progress and you get more used to the material, the terminology I use in the class. So it should be expected, just as a matter of like time progress, that the way you would perform in the final exam would tend to be higher than the way you perform in the first exam, right? Because it's just as a matter of progress, regardless of the changes I make in the middle of the semester, right? So I, for instance, introduced like this idea that I'm trying of having some short Panopto videos, and I want to see how students would perform, like to see if it would increase participation. I cannot, if that affected the final grades, if it's improved, I cannot actually say I cannot be certain that it's due to the change that I made. Because it just could be that, okay, by week 14, week 15, just students got better. They became more familiar with the materials, they studied more, and so it improved. And because I don't have a comparison group, I cannot tell for sure if the intervention I introduced was the reason I saw improvement in the post-test or not. So the issue is doing a quasi-experiment and this is important, like you don't have a control for what we call the mere time effect. And you would see this in campaigns, like if you have an advertising campaign, like like let's say you just open a taco truck. Okay, first month passes by, second month, third month. In the 4th month, you started to do like a social media campaign. In the 5th month and 6th month, you started to see an increase in visits or sales. You cannot tell for sure if that improvement is due to the campaign per se, the social media campaign, because it just could be more people knew about it. So if you're a new restaurant, at the beginning, yes, most people or all people never heard of you. Then okay, like 2 people visited, 5 people visited, they liked it, they introduced their friends, they have 20 more people coming, then 50 more people coming, and then by the 6th month, the whole town knew about the place and they're frequenting it more, right? But you cannot tell, so the campaign could just coincidentally parallel that mere time effect of more people knowing about the place, right? So the campaign could have like no detectable effect that you compare to something else. Here, like here we have actually a type of a full experiment, which we call it can be called time series, or it's called like sometimes like one group pre-test, post-test, pre-test, pre-test, post-test, post-test design, in which right here, let me grab my pen. In which here you actually have a pre-test. There's one intervention, and then you have a test, different intervention, and then you have a test, a third intervention. So you would have intervention, before each test. And the idea is you could have multiple tests, and like that is to say experimentation. So you would have experiment right here, and then and then that would lead you to then do post-test after each experiment. So it's one group, and then they go through different conditions, and then you want to see how they would what changes would happen after each condition, right? So that's like what they sometimes call point series. So you have 2 times or more points of intervention. You have one group, you introduce an intervention, you took a post-test, another intervention, then a post-test, and maybe a third intervention, and then a post-test, et cetera, right? And so this is useful if you want to see gradual changes. Let's say if you were able to conduct like a long-term experiments, you could see gradual changes. Or minimally, you would see like a development like of one group in reaction to different experiments, right? So depending on measuring the reaction to the first manipulation to the second manipulation, right? This one is used if you want to see what changing happening to the same participant. So here, I'm going to play a short video demonstrating an experiment, and I would like you to check or pay attention to what are the conditions in this experiment. So let's play the clip and let me know if you have an audio.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions. They turn away. They feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Okay. All right. So could you please turn your cameras back on so we could just have a group discussion? So could anyone tell me what's condition A and condition B in this short experiment we just watched? What were the two conditions?
Yeah, I'm outside, so it might be a little loud, but I think condition A was like the responsiveness, like the mother responding, and then condition B was the mother not reacting.
Right. So it's called the still face experiment. So it's the facial expression. So one is like an interactive facial expression, and the other condition B is the lack of the mother like doing any facial expressions at all. It was nothing, not happy, not sad, not angry, not fearful, so nothing, right? So facial expressions and okay, and one with facial expressions or interactiveness with the baby, the other is not, okay? And then what was the dependent variable? What's the reaction that they were predicting by this experiment? What did they want to see? So those two conditions were supposed to affect what exactly? Before they affect what? They were supposed to affect whom? Who was supposed to be affected?
The baby.
Right. So the baby, yeah. So the baby is the subject of the experiment. And the dependent variable, what was the dependent variable? What was the outcome? What do you want to see?
The baby's reaction to the mother kind of still facing.
Yeah. So the baby's reaction, and what was okay? So what was the baby's reaction to each condition?
It was like the baby ranged from like being happy to trying to like get the mother's attention by like doing things that she knew usually would get her attention, like pointing, and then it went to the baby just being really upset.
Right. Really upset to which condition? In which condition the baby became really upset?
Oh, condition A, or the independent variable.
Condition B, actually, you're thinking like the second. B is the second one, like the mother did. Yeah, yeah. It doesn't matter. Those are like you could switch them, right? So so the baby's got like let's say an angry reaction or like a feeling of sadness when when the mother didn't show any facial expression, right? What's the moral of the story? Then what's the key takeaway from this experiment? What type of theory would make out of this experiment? You would say what?
I guess you could say like at that age, babies are like cognitive enough, they're like surroundings or like aware enough that they understand like other people's or like they react to other people's emotions.
Right. And let's say parents at this moment, right? Because at least this experiment was like solely done on like a parent-child relationship. But you're right. So the hypothesis that I'm trying to get you into is like the hypothesis of this experiment was saying, okay, people at this age are able to recognize and react to the facial expressions of their mothers or lack thereof, right? So babies at like babies who are 1 year old have the ability to recognize facial expressions and to recognize if someone who's significant to them or a parent is responding to them or not, right? And so the idea then, so that's just a hypothesis. And the way you're going to prove that is then, okay, let's have, or prove is a very strong word, let's say support or demonstrate. So the way to demonstrate that is to then, okay, you want to see if 1 year olds could recognize their mother's expressions. Let's have a condition in which the mothers interact with them, like with facial expressions, and another condition where the mother does not interact with them. And if you see a change in the baby's reaction or behavior, then voila, then you just have demonstrated that it does have an effect. So that's what, like, so that this example was okay. So one group, so obviously it was just a video, but obviously there were many babies. So it was like one group of babies, and each individual went through the same like two conditions, right? What's the benefit of doing it like of having each baby go through both conditions as opposed to having two groups of babies, like in one in each condition? So one group of babies, moms interacting with them, another group of babies, mom not interacting with them. Why? What's the yeah? So what would be the issue with that, as opposed to same baby going through the two conditions?
You need to be able to make sure that like the individual baby is not like reacting in an unexpected way. Like you have to make sure that they're reacting consistently to both variables.
So that's right. So what Lily is saying that you it could be. So let's say those scientists or researchers did two groups of babies, one in which mothers interact, one that mothers do not. We cannot tell yet if babies would change, right? So if the mothers are interacting with their babies and the babies are laughing, we cannot tell they would stop laughing if the mother stop reacting. So it could be due just to the two groups of babies having different reactions than one another. But when it's the same, it's the exact same baby or the exact same group of babies going through the like two different conditions and showing two different reactions, then we cannot say, oh, those are different babies. No, it's the same baby And we detected the change. Remember from the previous slide, we detected the change in reaction to the manipulation, right? So save this for a moment because then there's like a different design. We have like different designs in which you could have two groups, and so you could have one in which you would have an intervention, and two when you don't have an intervention, and you would see the reaction, right? So imagine, for instance, yeah. So for example, like introducing toys or introducing tablets. So this is a cell phone, but I have my tablets over there. But like the effects of tablets on like baby's behavior. We had like a study before about that, right? So you could have an intervention group in which you would allow, let's say, parents to give their baby a tablet for like 2 hours. And then another group, they would do they wouldn't be exposed to like any tablet or play with it at all, right? And you want to see at the end of the day how they would react. This issue is important. Like why you would need a control group for this one specifically, right? Because you want to see the reaction uh, when uh, when the tablets are taken away, right? Okay, so you want to see kids not working with tablets and kids working with tablets, and so if you're doing it on the same group, think of it. The kids are still thinking about the tablet. You just took it from them, right? So you cannot measure the reaction of taking the tablets away, right? And so sometimes you would need this, like yeah, you would need a control group because the intervention won't work. So the second intervention won't work if you have a prior intervention. We call that by the way, this, okay, so sorry, there's a misspelling here. So sensitization effect. So such that the first manipulation you introduced would affect everything that comes after, right? So yeah, so if it's like the example I'm giving about the effect of tablets on babies' behavior, once you let them play with the tablet, they would keep thinking about it for the whole day and nagging about it for the whole day. As some of you could tell if you have any like small, like little siblings or nephews or cousins or something like that, right? Or for example, if you want to see if watching horror films have an effect on emotional engagement, right? Um, yeah, like so they watch horror films. Once people watch it, you cannot make them unwatch it. They would keep thinking about it. So how we'd compare the reaction to when they don't watch it, right? So you have to have then a comparison group or like a control group, all right? So that's yeah. Um, then sometimes the issue with that is like you don't have when you have this, you want to have a like a baseline, and so what you would find most researchers do is like have some sort of like a pre-test and a post-test. So you measure like you have a pre-test, one getting intervention, one is getting nothing, and then you will see a post-test. Let me ask you a question, all right? And you can raise hand. Do you think horror films or watching horror movies increase appetite or decrease appetite? Right? Do you think horror films increase appetite or decrease it? Um, okay, so Lily said decrease. Who says it? Who thinks it decreases appetite? Raise your hand. Horror films decrease appetite. Okay, so Lily and Evelyn. Okay, so I'm then gonna ask you, okay, who thinks it increases appetite? So horror films increase appetite. Okay, Olivia, tell us your rationale. what do you think? What you think?
I don't know. I just feel like maybe um, it might like keep you on the edge of your seat, and you might like need some, or like maybe you have like it makes you want to like keep doing something. Like I don't know. I just imagine if you're like watching a horror movie, you kind of like. I feel like I kind of want to keep eating popcorn because I like,
Oh, okay.
you know what I mean? I don't
As
know.
an escape mechanism, right?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know.
You, you watching a movie, if you just keep concentrating on it, you actually feel more horror.
Yeah,
So
I
you
don't
keep
know.
eating something.
But like,
You know the phrase stress eating?
yeah, I think that that has.
Uh,
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Soler, what do you think?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking along those same lines of like I know when I like am watching a horror movie, um, I can get really into it and then I won't eat anything. But I have friends where like they get really nervous so that they're like stress eating as they're watching it because they're like, trying to like distract themselves as they're watching the movie or whatever, like doing a repetitive act. So I kind of feel like it almost depends a little bit on the person or maybe the movie, maybe the type of horror movie.
Right, right. And assuming, yeah, like with the movie, but that's a different issue. If it shows food or something that could contaminate the experiment, but like it just like the feeling of horror could 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 increase appetite. Evelyn, what do you think? What's your take on the issue? Do you think
I think that
what
it
do you
would
feel about
probably
it?
make, oh, sorry, I meant to lower my hand. It would, yeah, probably just make people lose their appetite because it's kind of like unsettling.
Yeah, yeah, right. So yeah, so the idea is it's a horror film, and you just having some different like emotional reactions, so you don't feel about eating. Like if you're being chased, if you just saw a predator, like in the forest or something, the first instinct for you is not let me eat something. The first instinct for you is to run, right? So if you're feeling or like if you're feeling grossed out by something, right, you won't feel like eating. How would we then? So like then, how would we test that? How would we test this hypothesis? How would we know? So by looking at this design right here, right? So the first condition would be what? What would you do with the first condition? Can someone walk us through it? We want to see the effect of horror films on appetite. So in the first condition, we will do what? So we have here, we got the first group. We'll do what? We said it's about the effects of horror films. So the group A will anyone? How would we conduct the experiment to find if horror films increases appetite?
Maybe like while playing the horror film, you could offer people, like you could give people the option of like eating popcorn, for example, like have it on a table nearby.
Right. So what we're going to do is then here, uh, so you're having this is group A. You're gonna test their appetite before. Okay, so we ask them if they would like popcorn, nachos, whatever. Watch, let's say, like few clips, and then ask them again. All right. So we measure the appetite before, pre and post, before and after, and then another group. We'll get them. We'll ask. Yeah, we'll ask. We'll take a pretest of their appetite. They watch. We will make them watch. I don't know, some like nature scenes or something, or like a still images, or nothing. And then, or let's just let them play on their cell phones, and then in post this we'll ask about the appetite. So here, because we have a control group, we have control over what we call the meal time effect, because something like appetite or enjoyment or getting or boredom or emotional attachment could increase or decrease by time, right? So if we have one group, yes, if they watch horror films or drama or romance, after 2 hours they want to eat something, right? So that's why we have a comparison group and we're doing a pretest for each one. So we're comparing the group to itself, pre and post, and then we're comparing it to another group. Okay, I made a mess out of the drawings, right? But the idea is that, like you see, when you have a control group, you could see both. So we control for the meantime effect and for what I call the sensitization effect, which is to say when you introduce something, people sort of guess what you're getting into, right? So if you imagine you're in an experiment, oh, you asked me about food before watching horror films, and now you're asking me about food again. So I think the experimenters are trying to trick me into eating or not eating, right? So that can, here with the, like post-test, you have no idea. In the control condition, you have no idea what the experimenters are trying to gauge. A different yet similar is like similar to that, but you actually have two interventions. So let me ask you a different question. Do you think comedy increases appetite? Who think comedy increases appetite? If you watch comedy, it increases your appetite. Who agrees with that? Ideas? Do you eat more popcorn if you watch a comedy film or a horror film?
I think a horror film because you need the distraction. Whereas like with a comedy film, you're like kind of trying to like, I don't know, look out for the next laugh, maybe? I don't know if that makes sense.
Mhm. So the popcorn will distract you from laughing.
Yeah.
And I think that during a comedy, it's very like you're very like laid back. You're not like
Uh-huh.
tense, maybe. So you don't really need something to like.
Yeah. So the idea, if you're more relaxed, you won't feel like eating, right? So that it could go both way, right? Hence, so it's an interesting question. Like, I don't think this could be a project you propose if you ever happen to go to grad school, but well, first of all, don't. But if you ever go to like want to do experimentation, like yeah, we could then compare comedy to horror, right? It could be that just watching a movie increases your appetite. It's just like a habit, and like there's some like a level of engagement could increase appetite. So if you compare watching a horror to nothing, well, you don't know what other type of movies would create. So the idea is, yeah, you take like horror or compare it to comedy or compare it to romance, and you could also have a control condition here. Okay, so we do horror, comedy, and control. So in this case, we would see the difference between two genres and also the difference between watching films or not. So it could be, yeah, that those both intervention and higher than control, but there's no difference between the two. So in the example I'm giving, that means it's not about the horror, it's about just watching any movie. Or it could be that comedy is more than the control and more than the horror, let's say. And we could see then because we see the effects on the group itself and in comparison to other groups. So that's what I mean by having a baseline because we have a pretest. Control for the mere time effect because we have like a control group. And then control for what we call carryover effect. So the carryover effect is if we let one group watch a comedy and then watch a horror again, what would be the issue? How would that affect our results? So if they watch a comedy first, and then they watch horror, and then we test them, what would be the effects or the issue with that?
The results would be muddled because at that point you'd be testing like the combination instead of the individuals.
Right. Yeah. So it's called that's why you said model. So sometimes it's called the contamination effect or the carryover effect, because your emotional baggage from watching the horror would be carried over to when you watch a comedy. So we won't attribute. So even if you do horror films post test, comedy film post test, even the last post test, you cannot tell for sure if it's attributed to the first intervention or the first materials or the second round of materials. So as opposed to the one with the baby, in which you have like a quick interaction between the mother's face and the baby's face, you cannot do two conditions in the example I gave on the same participants, because they would be like, yeah, like I'm doing a series of ads, and so there was like, in one condition there's an attack ad on a politician, and in the second ad you're actually praising the politician. If you expose it to the same group, so even if they see the positive ad, they still thinking about the negative ad. So you won't be able to distinguish the two side effects. Let's watch a so this is going to be last part. So let's watch this clip, and then I'll ask you which
Emotion
condition
is a
of that.
nonverbal language.
Is your tummy ticklish?
Emotions reveal the cognition, the understanding of the baby. And furthermore, emotions are the nonverbal communication of the baby towards the parent and the parent towards the baby. Therefore, I thought that emotions were a one royal road to the study of the baby's development.
In this study, babies between 9 and 12 months are brought into the lab and placed on a large plexiglass top table. Half of the table has a checkerboard pattern just underneath the surface. But halfway across is a visual cliff, which the baby can tell drops off steeply. The plexiglass top continues, so it's perfectly fine to proceed. But the baby isn't so sure. And this is a big drop for a baby just starting to crawl. She wants to get across to get the toy, but she's cautious and looks to the opposite end of the table where her mother is. The parent is instructed to smile or make a fear face.
If the mother is posing a fear face, the baby typically does not cross this stair step downward, this modified visual cliff or visual step. On the other hand, if the mother poses a smile or somehow poses a nonverbal communication that is not prohibitive but encouraging, the child is much more likely to cross over to her. This particular study demonstrates the role of nonverbal communication in determining the child's behavior in uncertain contexts. A baby will, when they encounter something ambiguous, something uncertain, will typically look to the significant other, the mother, the father, a grandparent, the caregiver, in order to figure out what to do. So by 11 to 12 months of age, the baby is already doing what all of us do when something unusual happens.
Okay, so let me ask you, what's the first condition and what's the second condition? Someone tell me again. What's the first condition? What's the second condition in this experiment?
The first one would be the mother like making a fear face, and then the second one would be the mother smiling or looking encouraging.
Yeah. And by the way, in this particular experiment, they had two separate groups, despite what you saw in the video. So one group, mothers making encouraging face to the baby, and the second group, mother making discouraging face. And they want to see people, like the kids, willingness to cross over the cliff or not. Last question, then we conclude. What third condition would you suggest for these experimenters? What third condition could improve the results of this study? Which one do you want to see?
Kind of similar to the first clip, like they could just have a mother like doing a still face and then seeing what the babies did.
Yeah, so that's the control condition, right? So that's what I meant. They're meant here. So you could have two interventions and one control, or like two interventions and see the results, like for each one. Okay, and so I hope this demonstrates what we mean by condition and why we do them all of that. We would continue later, like doing like talking about hypotheses and whatnot. Do you have any questions? Okay,
I think
so
my only
start.
question, really quick actually, is about the final exam, because I think you had said it was on Monday, but on the like final exam schedule from the university, it says Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9:05 classes. The finals on Wednesday.
Yeah, it's on Wednesday. Monday is not an exam. Wednesday is like a study day.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll see if I made a mistake, but yeah, it's on Wednesday.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Lily.
you.
Okay. Yeah. Take care, everyone.